Hey y'all, welcome back to the Alchemy of Abundance Virtual Summit. Thanks for joining us again. We're discussing more pleasure, more fun, and making more money. I'm Chris Jolly, and right now I'm joined by expert coach and speaker Titus Jordan from Glow Growth and Development, kind of a tongue twister there. Focused on helping individuals who feel dissatisfied, frustrated, and often expressing these emotions through anger and behaviors that don't align with their own true selves. Titus is a facilitator whose role is to assist people on a journey of self-discovery, enabling them to tap into their true potential. Titus, thanks so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to have you. Glad to be here. So now your talk today is entitled Big Ego, Fast Cars, and Lots of Money. So let's dive in. What are we talking about? Lamborghini, stacks of cash, and being full of yourself?
Uh, well, yes, in a healthy way.
Okay, let's hear it.
So here where I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, it's an abundant city, right? There's lots of wealth. Uh, People, I mean, Lamborghinis are all over. McLarens, I mean, Rolls Royces. It's it's one of the more affluent cities that I've ever known, for being a small town too. It's not like New York, not like Dallas. I don't know if you've ever been to Dallas, but there's that air about Dallas that you're like, man, this is a money making town.
Yeah.
And so is Sarasota. Well, maybe not money making, but definitely there's the monies here. And what I found is that a lot of people can be a mile wide and an inch deep, right? They have the big ego, they've got the muscles, they've got the fast cars, and they've got tons of cash. But they have those internal struggles, the emotional baggage, those things that they've pushed under the carpet for way too long. And it affects their relationships, one with themselves and two with the others around them. And so I was in prayer and meditation recently, and yeah, Spirit told me I was guided to, start addressing this crowd of people, especially men. Right? It's a men's program,
Yeah.
Where they've got the ego. It's not healthy, right? It's a macho. It's not a healthy masculine, and they've got the fast cars, they've got the pretty girl on their arm, and they've got a boatload of money, cash stacked up. But it's evident when I cross their path, pretty evident, when we engage, that their values aren't aligned, their priorities are not there, their values, ethics, morals need to be worked on. And so I created this program. Strictly 941 is the title of my workbook, that takes people through this, and it helps them start looking on the inside of what it is that they're living with and living in, not authentic, not aligned, in discord, right? They get triggered, they have anger issues, they're frustrated. And so I work with these people, and I work with these guys, these men, and I help them get through these challenges. I help them get to the other side of peace and joy and love and happiness and fulfilled, right? You'd be surprised how they have all this external stuff and they're empty on the inside. They have that hole in their heart, and they're trying to fill it with sex, drugs, cheap sex, whatever, alcohol, and it's very fleeting. And so I have an opportunity to show them a way, right? I consider myself a guide, per se, a teacher that helps men, discover that fulfillment, truly the true fulfillment that's within inside them.
Yeah, the question of authenticity and acting in alignment is so interesting because you can have people who don't have any money at all and are so aligned with their life and so in tune, and maybe they just don't need a lot of money, and so it's aligned for them to not have them. And then, like you said, you can have these people who look like they have the world, but they're just trying to paper over something and they're way out of alignment with themselves. When the ego takes charge, Do you ever find that it's in alignment with our true selves? And if so, how often?
Well, once they've gone through the transformational journey and they have a healed ego, then I feel that an ego, a healthy ego, is okay, right? Because I don't feel that God or the gods, like if you were to look at the Greek gods, they're not ashamed of who they are. And neither should we be. We should not be ashamed of who we are. Like I grew up in a religious environment and I've lived in a religious environment through a lot of my adult life. But a lot of that is guilt, shame, right? Fit in a box, don't do this, don't do that. And so I really had to go through a cleansing process. I say in an initial talk or video that I did, I took the house of Titus. I opened up all the doors, all the closets, all the windows. I took the house, I turned it upside down and I shook it out.
Nice.
Right? Because I really wanted to examine everything that I put back into my house. And if it wasn't something that fit, if it wasn't something that was genuine, right? That's another word that I've started to use because authentic is passed around fairly easily and lightly. And I've actually said genuine. Let's look at the genuine you and what's that genuine person look like. And a lot of times these guys don't even know what that genuine person is because they've been wearing the mask, the masquerade mask, like I did. I was that guy. I could very easily switch the mask for whatever it was that the situation I was in. But I didn't know who I was internally. I wasn't solidified. I wasn't fortified with that character that I am now. The bold, the courageous, the confident, right? That person that knows where I am in the world and where I am in the universe and with my relationships to the divine.
Yeah, no, Titus, this is fascinating because we're talking pleasure and money, and you work with these guys who seem to have all the stuff. They've got the money, they have the things that should be pleasurable or that most people think will bring them pleasure. And I'm sure it brings them some, but like you said, they're a lot of them kind of empty inside, or they're wearing this persona. How do you work with them, or what do you find is effective to help them kind of break down the mask they're wearing and connect with or discover for the first time, their genuine self?
I call it cracking the egg.
Okay.
You got to crack the egg. And I was talking to a lady last night, and she was talking about her husband. And, she's done this work. She's gone through this growth process. She's working through it. There's still things that I was able to help her with. And she's like, well, my husband, he doesn't want to grow. And I was like, well, and so after the conversation, things come to us when we're in a moment of clarity. And I was like, oh yeah, she needs to help crack the egg, right? Crack his egg, crack the egg that is that exterior. And that's usually, where I start. It's like, hey, what is it? And what are you frustrated with? And then I just really hit nail and work on those pain points because they've got to recognize it themselves. They've got to come to an awareness, right? We need to come to an awareness and understanding that this isn't working. What I've been doing in life is not working. What do I need to change? What do I need to fix? And it's me, it's them. And so once we can crack that egg, then we can start, laying some things out and saying, okay, does this work for you? And usually it's like, no. Well, then why do you keep doing it? Well,
Let me ask you, because I feel like a lot of that, especially for men, because of the pressure in society to perform, to do well, to rise to the top, all of that sort of thing, that a lot of us get this idea of the life we're supposed to lead, how it should look, what we're supposed to measure up against. Do you find that for a lot of people, they're just trying to, measure up to that yardstick, and that's why they kind of head that route? Or what do you think that's about?
oh my goodness. It could be any number of reasons, right? I mean, we're talking a couple billion people on Earth, and how did they get to where they're at? It could have been something from childhood. It could be something from their parents, right? A lot of times it's the paradigm and the narrative that they have impressed upon them from society, where they grew up. down here in Florida, we get a lot of people from the Northeast, New York, Jersey, so on and so forth. And, you know, there's just that, we'll use the word stigma, you know, that they have that, okay, I need to look like this, act like this, because that's my surroundings.
Yeah.
And so, excuse me, my phone's dinging and I don't like that. I apologize.
That's okay.
So yeah, it's that paradigm that they're living. And so what I do is I deconstruct the paradigm. I deconstruct who they are, their character, right? It's like, okay, well, you have these characteristics that you're holding on to. How is that serving you? And it's like, well, it doesn't serve me, but I've been living it so long. Well, that's okay. We can work on that. I can work with that. You know, there's, I'm a firm believer in meditation. I believe that we can change I know that on an annual basis that the cells of our body, right, our skin, we shed skin. We're continually going through this rejuvenation process physically. And so, yeah, let's go to the molecular. Let's change the code. And so I'll go as deep as they're willing to go to rewrite the code so they can live the life that is meant to be lived for them.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, and that's that so much of this, especially when we talk about ego, comes down to identity. We have this thing, human beings, where one of our like main focuses, whether we know it or not, is to try to be consistent with the person that we believe ourselves to be. Now, how we came to believe we are that person, of course, is a whole different long story that, you know, we're not going to get into because, like you said, it's different for every person. But in order to make that change, you have to come up with a new identity. And in order to create a new identity, obviously, you really need to dig down and get a lot of clarity and find out what's important and find out what you really value. So, Titus, how clear are you about your own personal values and beliefs?
I feel like I'm pretty clear, right? My first program that I created, gosh, probably 6 months ago, is called Divorce the ID. And some people are like, why do you use the word divorce, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're divorcing that old person. We're divorcing that person, that character, that whatever. So to answer your question, yes, I even to this day, I have practices that I exercise, right? There's the physical exercise, there's also the mental, the spiritual, the character exercises that reinforce that man that I want to be, that I am. And then I solidify it and I make it concrete and resolute and I stand on it.
Excellent. And yet, even when we do that and do our best, you know, we're all still working through things. We all still have triggers. What do you find triggers you? How well do you understand your emotions around them? And then a follow-up to that is, how do you find that interplays with your business? And what do you do when you have something negative come up in your business and you're not feeling great about it?
So I use the word pivot, right? So I'm going to kind of work a little bit backwards in your questioning. So I have a thing called pivot. And so I create, and I'll create with my clients, a pivot, picture, a pivot, whatever, saying. And so when those do come up, I pivot. I immediately pivot because I don't want it to sit there in my mind, right, in my thoughts, because we get what we think about, we focus on. And so I immediately go to my pivot point. Now, that being said, you're talking about triggers and emotions. For me personally, there's still things that we need to sit in, right? We need to sit in those emotions. We need to acknowledge them. Okay, I'm feeling like this way. Because it's not, I don't want to have an emotion and sweep it under the rug, right? It goes against what I teach.
Yeah.
And so when I do get triggered or I feel it, right, I don't respond. I don't react. That's the first thing, is don't react. Sit in it, acknowledge it, contemplate it, think about it, right? And see and think, how do I want to respond? And so for me, there's, gosh, in world, you know, interactions, I don't get triggered too much. There are things that injustice, right? That's a pretty quick trigger for me when I see something happen in the world out there, like an injustice of such. I usually triggered, and that's where the samurai and the knight come out, right? And in that persona. But lately it's been my son. I see my son, and we want the best for our children.
Sure.
And we see their potential. We know their potential. I do. I'm like, I know what I've done in my life. I know it's possible for me, and I absolutely believe it's possible for you. You know, I told my son the other day, I said, I said, time has the same value, whether you're 17 or 50. The value is the same. You just have less of it when you're 50, but time is still equal. And yet you or people choose to, we'll say, waste or spend their time in a manner that devalues themselves, devalues the time. And so it's, yeah, and just sit in it, acknowledge it, think about it. How do I want to respond? What's the best way to navigate through this situation? And sometimes it is walking through those challenging, difficult conversations that are hard, but being mature enough to not lose our cool, to not raise and elevate our voice. You know, a while back, my son, a while back, he says, "Why are you yelling?" Like, duly noted. If you want to have a mature conversation and I don't need to raise my voice and you can still hear me, okay. I saw this thing. It says, it's from a monk, I want to say. He says, the reason people yell or scream or raise their voice is because they're distant. Right? They might not physically be separated, but they're in a separated place. And so they're yelling, trying to reach that other person. So what can we do to get on the same page?
Yeah, gotcha. That's so key, that point you brought up about being able to actually sit in the emotions when they come up, because a lot of those emotions, a lot of those things that trigger us are, of course, very uncomfortable. And most people don't like to be uncomfortable. That makes sense. But what they do often is they'll push it down, they'll set it aside, they don't examine it. And what happens with your triggers if you don't do anything with them? Well, they just bubble under the surface till they get bigger and they get bigger and they get worse and you explode or whatever. Yeah, so crucial to be able to just be curious, be accepting of where you're at, and be willing to look at it, because that's really, I've found, the only way effectively to move through those kind of situations.
Grace. The lady I was talking to last night, I told her, I said, give yourself some more grace. Love yourself a little bit more. Do some mirror work. There's a great Louise Hay YouTube video about mirror work. It's a couple hours. It goes on her book, actually. It's her book. And saying, Titus, I love you. I'm learning to like you more and more. Looking in that mirror and being more comfortable with yourself and who you are, and being understanding and compassionate. Okay, I got to this place in life because of these situations that I grew up in. Okay, now that I'm here, I'm not in that situation anymore. Here, I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm supported. Okay, I don't need to believe that lie.
Yeah, it's funny. We get about 7 or 10 years as kids getting all this stuff jammed into our heads, and then we spend the rest of our life trying to unpack it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's those challenges, and I had mentioned briefly, I want to touch on it again, those challenging conversations. It's you know, I was divorced a couple years back, and we avoided the challenging conversations. We avoided the not heated, but those difficult things that we needed to talk about. And because we weren't strong enough in who we were individually to be able to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's work this out. And so finding somebody that has that when you're going through that is huge, because then you can sit down and you can play that chess game. You can go through whatever it is, lay it out on paper if you need to, and say, okay, let's work through this. And usually it's growth on both sides. Both people have an opportunity to grow at that point.
Yeah, I think in any relationship, both people have an opportunity to grow. The question is whether or not they take it, you know?
Amen.
Titus, I want to talk about entrepreneurialism a little bit. I feel like most people go into business because they found something that they like to do. I know that there are some people who just see a great money-making opportunity and they don't care about the business. But most people that I talk to are really passionate about what they do and they love it, which is great because if you're going to spend your life doing something, you should have fun doing it. But at the same time, business is very challenging. It can be at times very heartbreaking. When things stop feeling fun for you in your business, how do you get back on track?
Hmm. There's on one of the social channels, uh, it's you do it. You have the discipline to move forward, right? And so sometimes it's that discipline that says, okay, I'm going to lay this out, whether I feel like it or not. I'm going to go to the gym. Whether I feel like it or not, I'm going to make those 10 phone calls today. Whether I like it or not, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Okay. There's times for that that in business, you just do what you are. It's discipline. You do what you're supposed to do. The fun part is for me is finding, I just wrote it. I was sitting last night. I had some spare time and I asked, right? We have guides. There's people that are here to support us, right? There's so many times we get caught up in this physical world. There's so much out there beyond that can help us in our business. And I simply asked the question, what do you want me to do right now? And the answer that came back was be creative. And so I think for me to get that fun is to go back to that inner child, to be creative, to find the adventure, to explore. That's how I get the fun back.
Love it. Awesome. Okay, now can you tell me if you can think about like maybe the most fun or the most pleasurable moment you've had in business, or just like a time when you were just like so high on what you were doing and you knew that, you know, you're doing what you're supposed to be and everything felt awesome?
Now,
I like that answer.
now,
Awesome.
right? It's yeah, there's steps that we take, right? It's the journey. It's the journey. And it's those steps that we take. And when you start clicking, right, there's the bit about surrender. We need to surrender. We also, there's so many, the dualities and the contrast. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray. If you look at the color spectrum, it's not black and white. There's gray, there's color in the middle. And so, yeah, it's those little steps. And when you're firing on all 8 cylinders or all 12 cylinders or whatever big your car is or whatever, quick or whatever, it's when you're firing on all those cylinders and you're in flow, right? Glow, growth, and development coming from heart and working in flow.
Absolutely. Okay, now Titus, for business owners, or most of them, it can be challenging to kind of find the balance between the business because if you let it, it'll take over every moment of your life, and relationships, family, connection, community, things outside of the business. How do you work to keep that balance, or what could you recommend to other entrepreneurs who might be struggling with that?
Do what feels right. Do what feels right. I know also there's purpose, right? There's a difference between purpose and passion. So you can have a passion and not have a purpose, and you can be running around like crazy in all the wrong directions. But when you have the purpose and the passion and you can get it to line up, when you can align your purpose and your passion, then you go, right? And you determine, okay, this is the direction I'm moving in. This is where I feel like I'm called. I asked the other day, why? Why is this not working? Why has this not worked? Why has this not worked is really what it was. All these things that I've done in the past. And I didn't get an answer right away. And then like a day or two later, it was, you're called to something higher. You're called to something bigger. You're called to something greater. And so when you find that you try something or you're doing something and it's not working out, then examine it. Is that really where I'm supposed to be going? Well, I don't know, but everybody else tells me I need to be going down this direction because that's the reward that they tell me I want, that car, that job, that annual income. And so I keep pushing down this way and I'm trying to get to that prize, trying to get to that goal, but nothing's working. Well, yeah, it's not going to work because you're called in that direction, in that purpose over there. But we don't sit there and we don't listen to that inner guide. We don't listen to our intuition and we ignore it and we keep pushing our head or pushing towards the window like the fly does, when all we really need to do is turn around and fly out the door to freedom.
Yeah, I think that that brings us right back around to the whole ego thing.
Yeah.
Titus, it's been awesome speaking with you. Now, your free gift, which the link will be for right below in the video here, is entitled Strictly 941. You brought it up a little bit earlier. Can you explain to everybody exactly what that is?
So it's a workbook that I created to help men kind of get through or crack the egg or start working on some of the internal work. And if you don't mind, I would absolutely love to help these business owners. I also have like a one sheet that I can provide on their brand. For me, my branding needed work for many years. I wasn't clear with my message. I didn't know. I was kind of feeling things out. I was that guy going here, 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 here. Nothing was working until finally I figured it out, right? This is a great book. It's by Donald Miller called The Coach Builder. The principles in that book can relate to more than just a coaching business. It can relate to any business that's moving online. So I would like to give them the Strictly 941 to the men, and to all the business owners, I would like to give them my little branding workbook, one sheet, to help them start clarifying their message and clarifying for them.
Amazing. We'll do very generous. Titus, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're absolutely welcome, my friend.
And everybody else, thanks so much for coming back to the Alchemy of Abundance Virtual Summit. We look forward to seeing you with our next speaker. Ciao.